Hello everybody, and welcome back to Lesser Known History. Today we will be talking about the Donner Party, a Western migration disaster. As many of you may know, there was a time in America's history called the Western Migration Period, and it was a time in which millions and millions of Americans that lived on the eastern coast or the midwestern parts of the United States moved out west across what was at the time mostly uninhabited grasslands, mountains, and deserts. Now, I say mostly uninhabited because there were a lot of native tribes that still lived in the region, but for the most part, there were no massive settlements like there were out east. Now, a lot of this terrain, while a lot of things grew there, was mostly inhospitable to humans at the time. Now, today, people live there just fine, but at the time, most of it was uncharted wilderness, and so there were only a select few safe passages, and I have a couple of them highlighted here. And they were filled with dangers, and many of the people that were moving out west were either going to go and settle in Oregon or in California, and both were either for fur trapping or for gold mining. So it was always an economic reason to move out west. Now, many of these places were filled with what I would call snake oil salesmen. They were people that were selling their ideas, kind of saying, hey, follow my route, it's going to be a good idea, because they wanted glory, but there are also economic reasons there. And this is important for this topic. If you look on the far left side of your screen, right above San Francisco, you're going to see a place called Sutter's Fort, and right by it, Donner Pass. And you can take a wild guess at why it's named Donner's Pass, given, the title of this video. So, one of these snake oil salesmen, his name was Lansford Hastings, went to these people of the Donner Expedition, who were a conglomeration of families that were moving from the east. A lot of them were newly immigrants to the United States, and they wanted to go find their fortunes out in the west. And so, as they're making their way through the Great Plains, you see they're leaving Independence, Missouri, at around Fort Laramie area, a man named Lansford Hastings comes up to them, and he tells them that he has this great new pass that he's figured out that will allow them to cut 300 miles off of their expedition, or that's about 450 kilometers for any international viewers. Now, here's what's important about this. When you look at this map again, the right side is flat, but as soon as you start going by the Colorado River, you see mountains start to pop up, and then it's mountainous all the way into California. Well, in the United States, there are three main mountain ranges. There's the Appalachians, which is to the east, the Rockies, which kind of goes through the southern, western part of the United States, where you can now see the Utah Territory, the New Mexico Territory, and the Nebraska Territory. And then far out to the west, you have the Sierra Nevada Mountains, which are in California. So, unlike the Appalachians, the Rockies and the Sierra Nevadas are tall. They're newer mountains. The Appalachians have been around for tons of years. And so these new mountain chains, and I use that in quotes just because it's not really that new, were hard to navigate, especially in the wintertime when it became very inhospitable. So many settlers, it would be a race against time to make it over into California or into Oregon before the harsh winters set in. So if you could potentially get a 300-mile advantage by going, if you look at your screen, following the Mormon Trail to Salt Lake City, going around the Great Salt Lake next to it and back up and around, you shave off 300 miles. That's a lot of time that you get back, and it makes it easier for you to get where you need to go. All right, so keep this all in mind. So, as the Donner Party leaves Fort Laramie, they are able to make their way to Fort Bridger, which is in present-day Wyoming. And they decide to take the route that Lansford Hastings had pitched to them called the Hastings Cutoff. Well, they take it, and instead of shaving off about 300 miles, it actually adds on top of their already long expedition 150 miles and takes them through the most inhospitable parts of the American Southwest, besides, southern Nevada and Arizona. But in this area, they go north of the Great Salt Lake, and they curve back around and meet up with the trails. So, They just lost 150 miles, and by the time they get out of this, almost all the other expedition parties are either in western Nevada and in northern California already, or they've already made it there. Like, they've already started to settle down. So they are way behind track. And remember what I said about the mountains? It's not a good recipe for success. So this is a picture of what is now called Donner Lake, named after the party, because they got stranded right and around this area. Now, on a typical summer, probably not recently, but on a typical summer, you would see this lake filled with water, fish, there'd be deer and other animals around. It's a very hospitable place. Not when it's snowing and everything's iced over and everything's dead. And that's where they found themselves. So the Donner Party had to make camp for a couple months as it snowed, and they progressively started to eat less and less. They ate their oxen that carried their carts. They ate their horses. There were even archaeological evidence that they ate their dogs, which is just really sad. They boiled rubber. They would eat bark and sticks. And that just sounds horrendous. But the biggest thing that brought this thing to fame, this whole ordeal, is the reports of cannibalism. So, of the sources that I found, there is a little bit of disagreement here about whether it definitively happened or not, because on one end, we have the notes and the letters of the people that were part of it that said, oh no, there was definitely cannibalism, and I saw it with my own eyes. But during an archaeological dig in 1997, they were not able to identify any human remains. Now, this is not to say that there wasn't cannibalism, because you could easily pick up human bones and bury them somewhere else, which, judging by how these people ate, they ate very sparingly. They did not want to eat people. The archaeological evidence even suggests that they would take out their chinaware and eat whatever they had, almost like a fine meal. But there's still no definitive answer to this, although I would lean towards there being cannibalism, because to me the evidence does show that there was, but you can't prove it without a shadow of a doubt. But that's what brought this thing to everybody's imagination. Eventually they are rescued, and I think a fun fact about this is that there was a school teacher that was there, and there is actually evidence, and based on archaeology and through the writings of the people, that while they were stuck there, the school teacher got all the children together that had survived and was still teaching them lessons. So good on him. So the impact. The Donner Party, in my opinion, is one of the saddest moments in the West. This happens during early Western migration, right? 1846, 1847. And of the 82 people, about 40, I believe it's somewhere between 46 and 48 people make it out. So about 40% of the people die. It's really sad. Had Hastings not been a greedy human being, 40 people might have made it to California. It's just really sad. And I was drawn to this because I feel like we don't talk about these sad moments as much. We see the West as just a group of fearless explorers observing an untouched wilderness, which, I mean, sometimes, sure. But there was lots of death, and there was lots of sadness, and there was a lot of human mishap. And one human mishap could cause everything to fall apart. And that's what you saw while this was going on. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lesser Known History. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a great day.